the new Elvis movie that's out, Sofia Coppola's Priscilla. I know you haven't seen the movie. It just came out, so I'll make sure to avoid any spoilers and try to just kind of focus this conversation in a more like broad or meta sense because I think there's some interesting stuff here. But if anyone's not familiar, there's this new movie out, Priscilla, directed by Sofia Coppola, and it's about Elvis Presley's relationship with his wife, Priscilla, who he met when she was just 14. Elvis was 24. Obviously, that was back in the day.
Back in the day when you could all fetch your old pony out for your 14, 15, rap for the picking. Yeehaw.
Right. I saw the film last night. Absolutely adored it. I think it's a fantastic movie. And to be honest, one of my favorite things about it was the fact that it actually was able to portray their relationship and their love in a way which was complex and which didn't just make Priscilla out to be this victim of forces that were outside of her control. Obviously she was a victim. I'm not saying she wasn't. But I think that there is a version of this movie which just completely victimizes Priscilla at the expense of her own agency, at the expense of her own personhood. And I really appreciate that Sofia Coppola went about this in a way that was sophisticated, in a way that was nuanced, and which didn't just make it out to be like this whole like fuck Elvis fest. Not that wouldn't be valid, but I'm just saying it would have
neon been release later. Fuck Elvis fest.
It would have been, I think, a little bit less interesting intellectually, and just as far as putting yourself in the mind space of the characters, if that makes sense. But either way, the late daughter of Elvis Presley, Lisa, apparently slammed the script before she died. She unfortunately passed away, I believe, earlier this year. But before her death, Lisa Marie Presley expressed shock and horror over the depiction of her father, Elvis Presley, in the script for Sofia Coppola's new film, Priscilla. Described in 2 emails obtained exclusively by Variety, the late Presley asked Coppola to reconsider her version for the character and to spare her family public embarrassment. The messages were sent 4 months before Presley suffered fatal cardiac arrest in January. What I don't quite understand about this is that the film was actually produced by Priscilla Presley and is based on her own memoir, Elvis and Me. So I'm not really sure what issue Lisa Marie Presley had. This movie was produced by her mother. It was based on her book. So I don't know if she just has a problem with the truth being out there, the reality of the circumstances which brought her father and mother together, if she just doesn't want that truth out there. But I really don't think the movie is like overly judgmental, if you want to say that. It's not, like I said, I don't think the whole point of the movie is to just paint Elvis as this out of control, crazy asshole. That's not the point of the movie, even though that is just kind of what happened, right? But Zach, I was interested in your opinion on this. I know you haven't seen the film. I don't know if you're even interested in seeing it, but I am interested because I always think this is such a fascinating discussion when it comes to biopics and movies based on real life events and figures. It always ends up being kind of a point of controversy. Do you think filmmakers have any sort of do they have any sort of consideration that needs to be made for the people that either were alive that their movies are based on or still are alive, to be accurate, to represent them in a way that is not, embarrassing, as Lisa Marie Presley said? Or do you think it matters at all?
I am going to come in here with the hard take that I feel like obviously I don't think you should slanderize somebody. So like, I don't think that they should come out here and make a movie that like represents Elvis as something that like he was explicitly verifiably not. Right. Like, I don't think it would be great if they like made a movie where Elvis and Priscilla were like, co-leaders of a local Black Panther party and all fucking, then he himself went to Vietnam and did a bunch like that. If that didn't happen, then that probably shouldn't be in your Elvis movie unless it's like explicitly satirical. But as long as you're like cutting to the bone, as long as you're, grappling with a historical record, I mean, at some point the Elvis thing becomes bigger than Elvis. It was a cultural revolution, right? Kind of like how Beatlemania existed as something larger than the Beatles, right? The Elvis thing. And Elvis, I like Elvis. He's got some great hits.
Me
But I'm
too, by
not
the way.
an anthologist on the guy, right? Like, I mean, Heartbreak Hotel, great track, right? But he was such a global force. The rockabilly thing. I mean, even if you guys grew up watching like something like Full House, but you have the entire Uncle Jesse character, and this is like, after like decades after the death of Elvis, this is still a guy that's like his entire aesthetic is built off of him. We had the Vegas Elvis guys for all. I mean, it was a huge cultural thing. So I think exploring who that guy was, what was the impetus for this, what was he like behind closed doors. Also, he had this like massively disturbing relationship with the lady that was fundamental to his fame, and like his relationship with her was like, Priscilla and all this, like that was a big part of it, right? And how did that impact this lady? And as far as like cutting to the bone and getting as close to that as possible, and I think honoring her mother instead of the daughter, who was like, this isn't your story, lady. Unfortunately, you're a byproduct of it, but
Right.
it's not your place to tell it. And I think that as an artist, it's up to you to, decide what your vision is. And, I don't think any artist wants to set out and be like caustic and cruel and vindictive over somebody that they're going to use as their subject matter, right? You want to authentically understand them. But if sometimes you're authentically understanding somebody who made really like cringy or, problematic, borderline pedophilic decisions. So yeah, and I mean, it is crazy how in the 50s, like Jerry Lee Lewis, he married his like 13-year-old cousin. Like that shit was still going on, particularly in the South.
And we don't have to lie about it. I just hate that instinct for people. It's like, oh, everyone loves Elvis. I love Elvis. I'm not going to lie about that. That doesn't mean that I feel the need to be dishonest about who he was or the time that he existed in. Like, it's just not an instinct I have, and I don't understand it. And it really is bizarre to me that she called the script shockingly vengeful and contemptuous. Again, I know you haven't seen the film, Zach, but I just would not describe it that way. I don't think that the point of the movie was to, just be like, it wasn't Elvis just such a giant piece of shit. It wasn't like an expose on Elvis Presley. It was really just about Priscilla, her experience and her life, which, happened to include being the victim of predatory behavior, of being married to someone who was 10 years older than her when she was like not even a fucking grown adult. Like, these are real things that happen. And just because we understand that reality and that history and that time doesn't mean that we have to burn all of the freaking Elvis Presley records. Like, that's
David
obviously
Bowie
stupid
did bad
too.
shit too, right?
Exactly. The
Beatles,
of course. Yeah. A lot of musicians, a lot of famous people, especially famous men throughout history, have done pretty horrible things. But yeah, I just think it's ridiculous that people have this instinct to romanticize or whitewash the truth about human beings. Like, these are ultimately just human beings. Elvis Presley was not some mythological god. He was just a guy who existed in this time. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting subject matter to discuss on the show. And I am excited to get your reaction to the movie, Zach, if you see it, because I thought it was fantastic and way better than the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie.
God.
Which
I watched the first like 45 minutes of that. I made it all the way through the what? He's what?
He's what?
He's what? It's like, oh god, here we go. I mean, what's up, sugar mama?
This film is like the inverse of that one in every way.
Sofia Coppola is actually a competent director that I respect and admire, unlike Baz Luhrmann, who have fucking just